The Sikha we will learning today is, you look at the Sikha Chelik Chov Daled, the Sikha for Chag Hasukkos. The Simcha Shebachag Hasukkos Gefinim, concerning the special joy, the Simcha that we have to have in the Yontiv of Sukkos, we find a Neusev V'Chiv Simcha was is demot from at the Yesa Yontiv. Besides the fact there is an obligation to be besimcha because it's Yontiv, and as the Rebbe says in order one, this means not only the days of Yontiv, even the days of Chalameid. And the Rebbe says in parentheses, Yontiv b'chlal, every Yontiv you have to is a special obligation and a chiyuv to be besimcha. Zman simcha seinu b'myuchat, especially if it's the Yontiv Sukkos, which is Zman simcha seinu avada, especially you have to be besimcha. So there is one union that you have to be besimcha because it's Yontiv. Seinen Eichdos Simches, welche seine verbunden mit Pulis, Messiomes, es mit Bechag Hasukkos. There are also Simches, reasons for Simcha that are connected to different acts that we have to do during the Yontif Sukkos. Besides the Yontif itself, there are certain things we do in Yontif that bring along with it the obligation of Simcha. And the Rebbe explains what they are. Starts off with saying the Simcha was verbunden mit mitzvahs netilas daled minim b'chag zeh, the Simcha that's connected with taking the four kinds, the lulav and esrog, etc. And that has to be with simcha. Which also what the Apostle says, you should take on the first day, and it says you should take the esrog and the lulav, etc. And then the Apostle says, and you should be happy in front of Hashem for 7 days. So this is simchas lulav. It's another simcha because you have the mitzvah daled minim that has to come along with simcha. And in order 3, the Rebbe brings Mara Mekaymes, where we see that the lulav comes along with simcha. The Rebbe even brings here from the Lashon of the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, the lulav, the daled minim, it says v'lismeach. So there's, besides the simcha of Yontev, the simcha of the lulav. Then you have on the simcha was verbunden mit nisach hamayim, the simcha that's connected with the pouring of the water. We know that during the year they had to pour nesachim, pour wine together with the korbanos. But Sukkos, besides that, there was another type of pouring. You had to pour water on the Mizbeach during the days of Sukkos. There was a special din. And that comes along with Simcha. They used to draw the water from the well the night before, and during the day, they used to use that water for pouring. The Yeshiva Samayim, the pouring of the water, was that they poured the drawing of the water for the water that they poured on the Mizbeach during Sukkos. And what the Shev given in the Nacht van Nisuch, and they drew it the night before the pouring, is given besimcha. That itself was besimcha. So there's a special simcha in connection to the drawing of the water that was used for the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach. Like the Pasuk says, you shall draw the water with joy from the wells of salvation. But that's a remez that has to be besimcha. So that's another simcha. So we have, besides the simcha of Yontev, with the simcha of the daled minim, of the 4 kinds of the lulav, maybe we have the simcha of Beis HaShe'eva, of the drawing of the water for the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach. The Seder von die zwei Simchas, welche von sie kommt früher, the order of these 2 simchas that we just said now, the simcha of the daled minim, the 4 kinds, and the simcha of the drawing of the water, which one came first, is verbunden und hebt up von der Machlekes Tanoim. It depends on an argument of Tanoim, and Gemara Tainis, then so it's nisach hamayim. When this din that they poured water on the Mizbeach Hasukkos, when did it start? The 10th day of the nisach hamayim zechon geben the zweiten Tag Sukkos b'shachris. One opinion holds that the pouring of the water started the 2nd day of Sukkos in the morning. So it's the 2nd day that he started the pouring of the water. Lefize, according to that, the yeshiva hamayim b'pamar hasheni gven b'layla hasheni. So according to that, when did the drawing of the water start? The 2nd night. The Mele, according to that opinion, this came noch dem Zman von Netilas Dalas Minim, was given by Yemerishin, that came after the mitzvah of Lulav, because the mitzvah of Lulav was on the 1st day. The drawing of the water for the mitzvah of pouring the water, according to this opinion, was the 2nd night. So the simcha of the Lulav came before the simcha of the pouring of the water. But the halacha is kedas shniya. Kedei ashniya. The halacha is like the 2nd opinion, anisach hamayim kol shiva. That the pouring of the water was all 7 days of Sukkot, including the 1st day. So according to that, the drawing of the water for the first pouring of the water was the first night of Sukkot. Before the mitzvah of taking the 4 kinds, the lulav, because that was done on the first day, and the simcha of the drawing of the water happened the night before. So here, according to one opinion, the simcha of the dalad minim came before the simcha of the water, and the second opinion, which is the halacha, the simcha of the pouring of the water, the drawing of the water for the pouring of the water, came before the simcha of the lulav. The Rebbe says here that Torah yizogdem klal as eila ve'eila divrei Elokim chaim. Torah says the rule that both opinions are the words of Hashem. They're both true, even though the halacha we only did like one, but in inyan, in learning, in seichel, in Torah, they're both true. They're both words of Hashem. They're funny verstandig. So since they're both the words of Hashem, we understand that in Ruchnius, in the spiritual sense, both opinions have a place. Even the opinion that the drawing of the water, which means the simcha of the drawing of the water, starts the second night, which is after the lulav. So must be a ruchnisdik explanation according to that opinion too. Noch mer, go further. Even according to the halacha, that the drawing of the water happened already the first night of Sukkot, is over the shleimus hasimcha for Simchas Beis HaSheva, but the complete joy that came along with the drawing of the water, which we refer to as at the Simcha of Simchas Beis HaSheva, which is the Simcha Yesera, it's an extra Simcha. Gemara says like that, and the Rambam says, Loshna, there was a Simcha Yesera, and the Simcha Yesera was done, it was done through the flute and other musical instruments. That started the second night after the first day of Yontiv. And the Rebbe quotes in order 13 that the Rambam uses the Loshen, when did they start having the Simcha? Right after the first day, the night after Motzei, the first day, which is the second night. So even though the drawing of the water was the first night, the halacha, but the simcha connection to drawing of the water came mainly the second night when they were allowed to use the instruments. The first night, which was Yontiv, they were not allowed to use the instruments, so they couldn't have that simcha. So the simcha started, really, the real simcha started the second night. Now, the truth is probably the first night was also besimcha because it says, Shafta Mayim Besosein, but not the shleimus simcha. The real simcha had to be with the instruments, and that only happened the second night. Even though the reason it started the second night is for a side reason, not part of the din of the drawing of the water. And the Loshen in Gemara is someplace in Erev, and the Rebbe says, Are you the Raviele? Imagine if you have something, and the din is so-and-so, but because of a side reason, you have to get something. But there's a lion standing over it. You can't get it. So and B'meila, it doesn't happen. But that doesn't mean that Be'etzim doesn't happen. It should happen. The same thing here. The reason is a side reason why they didn't have the simcha the first night was because using the flute, which means using the instruments, you cannot use it. It doesn't push away Shabbos or Yontiv. And the first night was still Yontiv. But Be'etzim, the simcha was there. And the Rebbe says, and what the Rebbe is trying to bring out, he's going to say soon, nevertheless, the bottom line is it wasn't there. But Hagam Be'etzem, it's a side reason why it wasn't there. And by the way, the Rebbe puts in the middle, was the Father is Bismanazeh, therefore nowadays, then Simchas Hashev is not verbunden mit Cholol. Nowadays, Simchas Hashev has nothing to do with the flute and these instruments that they use in the Beis HaMikdash. Is Yashleim, but the Rebbe says we could say, as he said many times, it's a loshim, but we find in Gemara that the kilkel means the problem is our tikkun, is fixing, which means because we have a problem, we gain something. That means the Simchas Beis HaShev nowadays, in many ways, in many inyonim, the Simcha starts gleich mit ashturim, with a complete storm, the Rebbe calls it, with the complete excitement, shame for the Resh Nach for Sukkot. It could start from the first night of Sukkot. Because the whole reason why in the Beis HaMikdash time, the Simcha, with the whole Shleimus HaSimcha started the second night, because the first night you couldn't use the instruments. Now that we don't use the instruments anyway, so and the reason is because we have no Beis HaMikdash, so there's a loss. But that loss makes it that we could start the complete simcha, the shturim of the simcha, the first night also. And in the order 17, the Rebbe says the same thing before. This whole union that you can't use the instruments is a gzeira derabanan. The Rabbanan made it. All the gzeiras derabanan happened in the second Beis Hamikdash. From then on. So in the first Beis Hamikdash, before the gzeira, there was a complete simcha, even the first night. So b'meil, it's not that be'emes there is no simcha comes out. Be'etzem there is a simcha. It's only a side reason you can't. And nowadays you could even have the great simcha the first night, and it used to be before the gzeira. Alpha became, but still, vibaldas yederin in the Torah. Since everything in Torah is exact, is moving. We understand. Adosu the simcha yisayre mikdash and zechvepei longem v'mitzoy yontav that the fact that in the Beis Hamikdash, the real shlema simcha, the simcha yisayre, happened motzei yontav the second night. He says the farvas azay is mer masten zitam teichen from the simcha. So it must be that this fits more, that the second night should be the real simcha, fits more to what that simcha represents, as the Rebbe will explain. The simcha yisayre is given by Migdosh, that this extra simcha that wasn't the Beis Hamikdash can esh zayin lamitoso, the mitzvah yontav rishon ulachrov. That be'emes, in the truth, that could only happen later. According to the spiritual explanation of what this means, since this, it has to start from the second. So there's a reason why the simcha has to start the second, which means, as we said before, after the simcha that is connected to the Daled meaning. Now, what's the explanation? Why would it be a reason? What's the reason that it should start the second night after the simcha of the Daled meaning? We'll understand it by first explaining them. First, to explain what is the connection that there was a pouring of the water, dafke and sukkis. Now, why we do it, we know, because the Torah says so, even though it's not written in the Torah, it's halacha l'meishem Sinai, but the Torah says so. But in Chassidus, we always learn deeper explanations why. So let's first look into, analyze the deeper explanation of Pnimius, why there is such a mitzvah of pouring water on the Mizbeach, and dafke in sukkis, not in any other yom. Why sukkis? So the Rebbe says like this: one of the differences that's written in Chassidus, as the Rebbe brings now 18 places in Chassidus, we find that one of the difference between the joy of pouring the wine, and we know wine has to do with joy. The Gemara says that we don't sing, we don't say shira, which is a song, only when you drink wine, because the wine comes along with simcha. So there is a simcha that has to do with the wine, when they poured the wine that came along with simcha. So the difference between that and the simcha for nisach hamayim, and the simcha, the difference to that and the simcha of pouring the water. So one of the difference is like this: the simcha for nisach hayayin is verbunden eich mit teva ha'adam. The simcha that comes along with pouring the wine, besides that it's a mitzvah to do it, and therefore you're happy to do the mitzvah, but it also is connected to the nature of a person. Bedugmet to the simcha was kommt von yayin stam. Just like a simcha comes from wine. When you drink wine, you get happy. So the happiness that's connected to the mitzvah of pouring the wine has a connection to the nature of the person. Therefore, yayin is beteva adovar sameach. Yayin naturally is something that brings a person simcha, makes a person happy. Does haste, it means like this: even though by pouring the wine, the simcha there is not because wine, posher physically makes you drunk or whatever makes you happy. It's a holy simcha. It's verbunden mit Aveidas Hamikdash. It's connected to doing the Aveidah in the Beis Hamikdash. Nevertheless, it's connected to the nature. Wine makes you happy naturally. So even though it's a simcha, but there is some nature involved. And then Rabbi gives an example. Just like the mitzvah that we have to be happy on Yontif. Was dar sein verbunden mit Yain Pshuta. The din is that the simcha of Yontif is connected to wine. As it says, Ein simcha ela b'yayin. The way you fulfill the mitzvah of simcha and yontev is with wine. So, is it a physical simcha or a spiritual simcha? The fact that the Yid drinks wine and gets happy, not because he drinks wine, because he has a type, he has a desire to drink wine. There's some kiyama mitzvah, you do it because of the mitzvah. B'meila, since he drinks wine because of the mitzvah, is the simcha was kum durch dem nicht inside dem yain natzme. So the simcha Yid has by anyonte, by drinking wine, is not because the wine itself makes you happy. Be by anitin, like by non-Jew, he gets happy from drinking wine because he drinks wine. Wine makes you happy. Nor mitzad the mitzvah shebazeh. By Yid, he's happy because of the mitzvah. Simcha shel mitzvah. It's the simcha of a mitzvah. Noch mehr shtiyas hayayin is the mitzvah. And here the mitzvah is to drink wine. So really the drinking of the wine on Yontif that makes you Simchas Yontif is connected not because of the nature of the wine, it's because it's the mitzvah. And the Rebbe explains it. Eden seinen Geyach Boris. We know Eden are referred to as a one nation in the land. And Chassidus Taich is a different Taich, not that it's one nation in nation in the land. It's a nation in the land, in the earth, that brings Echot. Gey, that brings Echot, that brings Hashem Echot into the Oretz. The says as Eich Metzadem Gufa Gashmi Eretz. So the Rebbe teaches like this. Gey Echot Boretz means that even when we're talking about the Oretz, Oretz is the physical, which means even it's at the physical body of a Yid. The Yidden are a special one nation, when a Gey Kodesh and the holy nation. But the fun is moving for that. We understand as if the simcha, but the Yiddish guf the feel done. So the simcha that the body gets from something that naturally will give your body simcha when you drink wine, from the kedusha mitzvah shebayayin, that comes from the holiness and the mitzvah of the wine. So comes out that it's the mitzvah. Afa pikein still, we bow that the simcha is verbunden afke mit yayin, but since we do say that the simcha is connected with wine, because as we say, ein simcha l'bayayin, only the real simcha comes with wine, and the halach is it has to be with wine. V'atam b'pshata Torah is, what's that the reason? Why does if it's a mitzvah of simcha, the person can be happy without wine? Why did the Torah connect it to wine and said that, how are you mekayim the mitzvah simcha yontif with wine? Is moving, is vile, and is betive made of simcha, since wine is naturally brings out simcha in a person. So it comes out here that even though the whole simcha really is a ruchnistic simcha. Simcha comes from ruchnis of the mitzvah, but it still has a connection to the nature of the wine. It's moving for that. We understand that the simcha mitzvah mitzvah ashayches to teva mitzias heilam teva yain. That the simcha that comes back with the mitzvah that has a connection to the nature and the mitzias of the world, the teva of the world, the teva of the wine. So the simcha of wine, which is connected to the Nisach Hayayim, pouring the wine, is connected to the natural inyan of the wine, which brings simcha. So as much as it's a holy simcha and it comes to the mitzvah, it's still within the framework of nature, that it's connected to the nature. The simcha was is verbunden mit Nisach Mayim agam mizbeach, but the simcha that's connected to pouring the water in the mizbeach, was Mayim seine betiva nit ken dover am mizbeach, water naturally does not make you happy. So that simcha b'avai shows us the simcha b'shiva samayim hotin k'shaychas in yonei teva, that the simcha that has to do with the pouring of the mayim, the water, is not connected to nature. That's a complete simcha that has to do only with Hashem, because the pasuk says u'shafta mayim b'sosim, when you draw wine, when you draw the water, you should be happy. So it's a simcha that has to do because Leib said so. It has nothing to. It's not limited at all to the yonim of nature. This is the specialty of pouring the water over pouring the wine. By pouring the wine, since the simcha has a hold onto the nature of the creation, so it's limited to the limitations of nature. So it's a simcha within the nature, even though it's the kedusha of it, but still it's put into the lavush, let's call it, the Rebbe doesn't say that word, into lavush, into the garment of nature, but let's limit it to the nature. But by pouring the water, the simcha the sim comes completely because Hashem said, but it's ain't sof, and Hashem is unlimited. The simcha, so the simcha is beyond limitation. It's not limited to the limitations of nature, because the fact that you're happy with water has nothing to do with nature. It's completely from Hashem. And now the Rebbe is going to say that, what does it mean in our Aveda? We poured, the simcha that came with pouring of the water was pouring on the Mizbeach. And we have these two types of pouring on the Mizbeach. Pouring of the wine, which is a simcha that comes limited still with nature. The pouring of the water is beyond nature. You could have, it's a simcha not limited to limitation, but that's been gave the Mizbeach. So the Rebbe says, Mavoyer b'yidua, explain them. We know every Yid has a mizbeach, spiritual mizbeach. He's a movement, so since every Yid has in him and a mizbeach, so we understand that it's simcha for nisach hayayin and nisach hamayim mizbeach. That the two ways of simcha, pouring of the wine on the mizbeach and pouring the water on the mizbeach, and you find that in the spiritual service of Hashem by every Yid, that you could have every Yid could serve Hashem. And when you serve Hashem, that's your Mizbeach. Mizbeach is the place where they served Hashem. Every Yid has his ruchnistic serving Hashem, was referred to as a Mizbeach. You have these two types of serving Hashem, similar to the 2 year, the simcha of the wine, which is still in the limit of nature, and simcha of the water, which is beyond that. The simcha for Nischa Yayin main Baveda Sodom, the simcha that came along with pouring the wine in the service of a person means a simcha shel mitzvah chalkum derchizbonas b'seichel, a simcha that comes through nature. And by a person, it means through nature, what? Through contemplating, through understanding with your seichel, to being bezbeina. Which means like this. When he contemplates and thinks about the great merit he has, but the Rebbe hat ihm gegeben die Möglichkeit zum Mekayim seiner Mitzvah. The Rebbe, Hashem gave him the opportunity to do a mitzvah. And you start thinking about the greatness that's there, that happens through you doing the mitzvah. As a ver do the mitzvah through the mitzvah you get one and you get connected to Hashem. So when you think about it and you understand that, it makes you very happy. But and since the simcha comes as a result of your understanding, your thinking, your logic, your reasoning, your hisboneness, is in as in of the mitzvah, the mitzvah from the modern mitzvah. So it's a kind of simcha that, as much as a simcha that comes because you are so close to Eibishter, but it came as a result of you, because you understood it. So there is felt here, besides the mitzvah, also the you part, the person part, the person's being. Just like the simcha that comes through wine. We said before, it could be a simcha. Simcha is because the pouring of the wine is a mitzvah. But nevertheless, there's some connection to that here also. You finally do have simcha because it's Deibish's mitzvah and you are. But what makes you happy because of Deibish? Because you understand it to be happy. So there's some limitations of the person's nature. When the Yesa de Simcha Mekeves Ba'asogit, that's a Simcha Magbelis L'Tefen Asogit. This is a lotion that the Rebbe brings from Samach to Samach from the Rebbe Rashab Tov Reish Zion, that since this is a Simcha that is connected, that is combined with your understanding, so it's a Simcha which is limited according to how much you understand, which we sound, that's simple shot. If you understand it greater, your Simcha will be greater. If you understand it less, the Simcha will be less. So it's not a unlimited Simcha. It's a Simcha which is limited to you. Shenke the simcha for nisach hamayim, but the simcha that comes from pouring the water is adumah from a simcha shel mitzvah. That's an example of a simcha of a mitzvah which is beyond your seichel understanding and your isboninus. When is that? B'shas each taken that new from mesiras nefesh. When the person is in a feeling of mesiras nefesh, it doesn't mean mesiras nefesh you're at the point where you have to get killed for Hashem. Mesiras nefesh here means that he's completely involved. Mesiras nefesh means it's not that you understand, you're ready to give up everything. If you're at a point where you give yourself completely over to Hashem, you don't have any ego at all, and you give yourself, that's called Mesiras nefesh and ruchnius. So you don't have to have an explanation in your logic how important, how great it is to do the mitzvahs. As soon as you hear that this is a commandment of Hashem, he commanded us, it brings out in a person a great simcha. And this simcha is a simcha mites, and this simcha is a real simcha, not limited. Has no limitation. It says in Samach to Samach there, that if it comes, you're at such a level, so it comes from your essence of your nefesh, beyond your keches hagluyim. Keches hagluyim are the revealed attributes of a person. Seichel is part of the keches hagluyim. Midas, feeling, is part of the keches hagluyim. So in the first level of simcha is with seichel that works with your keches hagluyim, which represents your being. The nefesh is beyond who you are. That's the essence of you, which is the neshama, the eibishter. So if it's a simcha that comes from a person at a time when he's completely given over to the Eibishter, has no limitations. When the fire is dafke wegen der simcha of nisach hamayim, zogen Chazal, dafke because of this simcha of nisach hamayim, when they poured the water, the Chazal tell us this lotion, mishal liros simchas beis hasheva liros simch miyomov. Whoever did not see the simcha of the beis hasheva when they drew the water, never saw simcha in his life. Now the Pashup Pshat means it was such a great simcha that he's trying to describe that it's the greatest simcha people ever saw. But Chassidus explains this represents something so great that no other simcha represents. There's a simcha of a mitzvah when you do a mitzvah like pouring the wine, but this simcha Hasheva represents the simcha that has nothing to do with the person's ego, nothing to do with the person's nature. It has to do with the etzem of the person. That's the highest level of simcha. When those in the close, the kishaychas for simcha is This is the general connection from the simcha by the pouring of the drawing of the water that he poured on the mizbeach to sukkahs. We said before it's connected to sukkah. We started saying that the explanation why is that on sukkahs. Now we understand because the simcha of sukkahs is similar to that. The simcha of sukkahs, the simcha of sukkahs. It's a time that we are happy. Kommt von der Avede Minyonim was am Zchuf getom Berosham Neseresi mit Tshuva Prat B'Yom as it says in Chassidus that this is a continuation, a result, so to speak, of what you accomplished on Rosh Hashanah and Aseresi mit Tshuva, and especially Yom Kippur. Ki Yidua, we know that it says in Chassidus Aderinya von Schach HaSukkah v'chakumt von Anan Yaakov. We know that the Schach of the Sukkah, which is the main part of the mitzvah of Sukkah, the Yont of Sukkahs, comes as a continuation of the Anane HaKovet. Anane HaKovet are the clouds that were there when the Eden were in the desert, Anane HaKovet. So the Schach represents Anane HaKovet. We know in Halacha, the Rabbi brings in order 28, the Gemara says, why do the Sukkah, why do we have the Yont of Sukkahs? Because it represents the clouds that the Eden had in the desert. That Nimshach, so it comes to our Sukkah, but how does it come? For the Eden Tshuva and Anak Teres Yom Kippur. It comes from the cloud of Yom Kippur, the tshuva that the Yid did do on Yom Kippur, and the Kohen Gadol used to go on the Kedesh HaKadoshim. I have a cloud of the Ketores of the spices. That cloud is the cloud that's connected to the Anan HaKovet that the Yidden had in the desert, and that cloud comes to Sukkot. So it comes out that Sukkot is a result and a continuation of Yom Kippur. And the Aveda of Yom Kippur, and by the Geya is the service of Yom Kippur, which is Achaz Bashon, that says it's once a year. So it's not only once a year in time, but it represents one, which is the, as we says, it's Mitzad Yechida Sheba Nefesh, as Yechida. We know the Neshama B'Yid has 5 parts: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Yechida represents the Etzem Nefesh. And it's interesting that this is not only in Chassidus, but in Order 29, the Rebbe brings Tosfos. Tosfos in Menachos Daf Yudches Madalo says that Achaz Bashon is Yechida. So Yom Kippur is a day where we have the revelation of the Yechida, the iskashrus von etzem haneshama b'tnei atzmusa yisborach, the connection of the essence of a Yid, the Yechida of a Yid to the Yechida of Hashem, to the essence of Hashem, like we say in the Hishainis, Yechida leyachdoch. It's the Yechida to your Yichud, Yechida of a Yid with the Yichud, with the essence, the oneness of Hashem, and that's what Yom Kippur is. Now, since Sukkot is a continuation of Yom Kippur, well, the roof of Sukkot is what's special on Sukkot. So this is kashrus, which is an essential kashrus, not because of any of your attributes, not anything to do with Keiches HaGluyim. It's their essence connection. It should come in a revealed way. That surrounds the person with all these inyonim. As much as we said that the Sukkot is Yom Kippur, and Sukkot is also the simcha of the water, is something that doesn't have to do with your specific attributes, because then it's you. But the point is, it's not the attributes, it's the essence of you. But what we need is that that feeling of that essence should affect every part of you. So it should take around every part of you, should be durginum, and should be absorbed with that feeling of completely be given over to Hashem. So it's on one hand not to do with the attributes, it has to do with your essence. But the idea is, it starts with the essence, which is so great, but it has to penetrate into every aspect of the person. That's expressed in the simple meaning of the mitzvah of Sukkah. What's the mitzvah of Sukkah? You should sit in the Sukkah 7 days. And the Chazal tell us it means Teshuvah came to do that. It means you got to live there. Teshuvah means just like you live in a house, you live there. What does that mean? You live there. Everything you do at home normally, eating, drink, etc. Then the mitzvah of Sukkah. Now you're supposed to do that in the Sukkah. So now every part of you is surrounded with a mitzvah, with the mitzvah of Sukkah. But this is the Esofa Maid of Sukkah of Talis. This is something in Sukkah, the Maid of Sukkah over Talis. We know that in Sukkah we have, it says, Makifim of godliness surrounds us. And we always say that's something special in the mitzvah of Sukkah. Before you could ask, why Sukkah? Talis also surrounds you. But now here the Rebbe explained that this is even more than a talis. Talis nemtarum the midin reisha v'ruba. A talis takes around the person, his head and majority of his body. Sukkah nemtarum eichal inyonim vanidin. Sukkah doesn't surround only you; it takes everything else. No limitations. Sukkah, your table is supposed to be in the sukkah, and the lashon that says in other sikhs is that when you go into the mitzvah, you're surrounded by the mitzvah. Not only you, your shoes, your clothes, your shoes, and the lashon is in other sikhs, the mud that's on your shoes goes into the sukkah. So the sukkah represents the etzem of a yid connection, which is a hemshech to Yom Kippur, but that comes down from that level and affects that every single part of you is absorbed with that feeling. When the father's chag is sukkah, there's man. That's why sukkah is the time when you pour the water and the simcha connected to the drawing of the water. But we said before, that represents the simcha that comes not from understanding, and that's why you're happy, but it comes from beyond understanding from your etzem. So here we see a common denominator between pouring of the water and sukkahs. While sukkahs roof taru is the simcha shemaylam dida bagbola. Like we said before, a sukkahs brings also is connected to the etzem of a person, which is beyond your own limitations, and that's what the pouring of the water represents. So that's why the pouring of the water was done on sukkahs, because the pouring of the water represents the same thing as what sukkah represents. Now the Rebbe is going to explain. Now, based on this, we'll understand the svara that simchas beis hashevet should come after the daled minim. After we have this asbara, now the Rebbe is going to get to it. How? Says Yedu, we know as the mitzvah for lulav is beteichnet nicht kein besondere mitzvah, es darf getan werden in dem Zman von seinem Hasukkos. We know, the Rebbe brings Marmakebis in order 33, that the mitzvah of the lulav and the daled minim, when we shake the lulav and the daled minim, in Teichon, what is the meaning of it? It's not a separate mitzvah from sukkah. In other words, normally we would think, when do we do that? It's a mitzvah of shaking the daled minim. What's the time? When do you do that? So you do that during the Yom Tov Sukkos. But that has nothing to do with the concept of Sukkos. It just, that's when we do it. So you do, it's not like that. The Teichon of it is not that. Nor ziot ashayches and kumt als hemshech zu mitzvah Sukkah. The daled minim, the lulav, is a continuation of the mitzvah of Sukkah. It's part of the mitzvah of Sukkah, and it brings something more. We move from the din, as we understand from the din which is brought down in the Alter Rebbe, in the Siddur that we from the Alter Rebbe, as mitzvahs nitelose the lulav besukki mitzvah min hamufche. That the best way to do the mitzvah of the lulav is in the sukkah. That shows all that there is a hemshech, a continuation in the mitzvah of the daled minim, the lulav, to the sukkah. What is it? But that's what the Rebbe explains. Sukkah nemt rein is the midim mit alle seinen yonim. We said before that the sukkah takes in all the inyonim of a yid. It surrounds it from the outside. Now, when you go into, and we said before that you're now surrounded by the mitzvah, but it's still Loshen Achsidus Makif. It's on the outside of you. It doesn't come into Apnimis. It doesn't come inside you. It represents a very high madrege which you're connected to. The madrege of the Etzem HaNefesh, as we said before, but it's still surrounding you. Und the roof of a mitzvah, netilas daled minim is ulekachtem lachem. The mitzvah, the daled minim, is to take that level and bring it to you. The Pasuk says by the mitzvah of Esrig, lokachtem lochem, take it to you. Der makif from sukkah ver genuma lochem. This, by the sukkah, which has that great level, as we said before, but it's still around you, now you take it to you. Vert ayere, it becomes yours. It goes into pnimis. So the sukkah, whatever sukkah represents, the lulav and the daled minim bring it down into yourself. But dosi their time was by the netilah from daled minim, that was a tzulek and some hearts. And that's the reason why the way to do the mitzvah of lulav, you have to bring it close to your heart. What does that represent? Kedei as in your neyem, in order to show that this inyan of what the lulav represents, in lev, in hergesh lev, it's coming to your heart, into the feeling of your heart. And if it comes to your heart, and it says in Zayar, Leib that the heart spreads itself out to all sides, so it comes out that the lulav is supposed to bring it down into all parts of you, in all attributes, that are in all limbs of the person, including the brain. And that's represented in the lulav, that we take what sukkah represents and we bring it down. Actually, in other places it even says that the lulav is long. So the lulav looks like a pipe. Just like when you have something on top and you want to, let's say something, and you want to bring it down. So you have a pipe that brings down whatever is there down. So the lulav is, so to speak, doesn't say this in the sikha here. The lulav is the pipe that takes the schach, you pick it up, You do the mitzvah, you pick up the lulav with the dalet minim. That means you're taking what the top means is the schach, which is that level we said before, which is that sabbath vayid, and that you bring it down and you bring it into your heart. You bring it down to you. So you take that, which is higher than your attributes, and you bring that, it should penetrate into your attributes. Und dafür of them is the rinya sukkah is gila maki b'shleim. Is only when you do the dalet minim, then what the sukkah is supposed to represent, which is the representing of the makiv, the surrounding around you of that high level, that's when it's complete. Even though, as we said before, anything that has to do with your keches pnimim, with your inner, which means your individual attributes, is limited. But the far further from Mesiras Nefesh, and that's what we said. What you really need, a higher level, is when it's beyond seichel, beyond your attributes. As we said before, the specialty of pouring the water over pouring the wine. Still, you must have the first thing, which is the higher than Agbola. You must have this essence that you connect to the Eibusher beyond any limitations. Is the Shleimus Aveda for Mesiras Nefesh. When is this Aveda that we have? We said before, call it Mesiras Nefesh, giving yourself over completely. When is that complete? When they're bitl Mesiras Nefesh, when this Mesiras Nefesh, this bitl that you have to Hashem, penetrates into the inner keiches that you have, into your seichel and to your midas, into your intellect and into your emotions, that idea goes down all the way. As you bring it down, you start off with knowing that this is the Eibishter and that's it. But you want that every part of the person should have that feeling, so you want to bring it down, that the Mesiras Nefesh should go down, that the inner keiches should also have that feeling of Mesiras Nefesh. And why is that important? Vorum, because number one, only if it comes down to every aspect of the person. Because what's a person? If you want to describe a person, you describe a person. Yes, this man seichel, this kind of midas. So the seichel and the midas, the keiches pnimiyim, keiches agluyim, that is basically what makes up the person. So if you want that the whole person should have that keich mesiras nefesh, because if you don't have the whole person, eventually it could go away. It doesn't have a kiyum, it won't stay. It's something great, but it doesn't stay. You want it to penetrate, become part of you. Part of you means it has to become part of your keiches pnimim, part of your keiches agloim, part of your individual keiches. So therefore, you have to have, when is the Mesiras Nefesh comes to its completion? If that keich bitl comes down all the way into your keiches. That's number one. And the second thing is, let's say, abavais of the heder agbola from the bitl Mesiras Nefesh. It shows how that feeling that you have of Mesiras Nefesh at the higher level has no limitations. As I said, Nefesh was that when it affects every part of you, that shows that Keich Mesiras Nefesh has no limit, that it went all the way to every part of you. There's nothing that's missing it. Then it really, the Mesiras Nefesh, or the bitl, that real bitl that you had from your Etzem Nefesh, is really blig vul, because it has no limitation. It comes and it expresses itself in everything you do. Now, we will now understand the deeper pshat from this opinion, that the drawing of the water and this happiness that you had, that explains that opinion, why it starts the second night of Sukkot, which means after you already did the mitzvah of the lulav of the dalet mina. Why? Just like we said before, that when is the Mesiras Nefesh, when is this bitl that you have? When is it b'shleimus? When is it complete? When it's absorbed, it comes down into that Mesiras Nefesh is revealed, it's done through the keiches pnimim. It comes down into the, as we said before. Is lachas kama v'kama. This is even the simcha was represented for the aveda. So that's been the aveda b'chlal. That your aveda has to be that the mitzvah of David is what counts, but that has to penetrate that every part of you recognizes that the mitzvah counts. That's been the aveda. Certainly, it has to do with the simcha that comes with this aveda together. Since in order to have the simcha, you have to feel it begilui. Simcha comes only from something that you know that's revealed. If something, the good thing is not revealed, you don't have simcha from it. And a lot of places we find this like about certain things. That the simcha, when could you have simcha? When you see that revealed. So when it's only hidden by you, be'etzem, then the simcha will not be. So when is the simcha of that inyan of pouring of the water, which represents the essence connection higher than seichel? Only when it comes begilui. So when that feeling comes down into the gilui of the person, that he feels it in the seichel, then he will have the real simcha. So the shleimus hasimcha of pouring of the water, which is beyond limitations, when is it b'shleimus? When it comes into gilui, when you feel it in your protim, in your details. When the second thing, simcha amiti, is when zihotnik and akbolas. What's a real simcha? Real simcha is when it's very without limitations. So I can give us an example of a simcha of a child gets married, and the child that was only child, and the child was born when the parents were old. It's such a simcha. There's no limitation. All limitations fall off. The shleimus hasimcha from aninya shelamayim masagas haseicha shalei. When is there a complete simcha from something that is beyond your understanding? When der inyan wird genommen nicht nur bebchinas makiv nor davke when kommt up in the pnimis. Not only when it remains makiv superficial, but when it comes in the pnimis. And that's when you have the real simcha of the higher madrega. When is the real simcha of the bligvul? When it comes down into the details of the person. The mitis movement, the simcha from Shiva Samayim. That explains why the simcha of drawing of the water, which the simcha was from which be'emes, as we said before, is connected to the simcha of sukkahs. So it's the same idea of sukkahs. So when do you have that simcha of the drawing of the water, which is the simcha of that higher level of being completely given over to Hashem? That's why it starts the second night of Sukkot. After you did the mitzvah of taking the esrog and the lulav on the first day. Why? After Ayid accomplished what he was supposed to on the first day, do the daled minim, from the 3 minim, from the 4 minim, what did he accomplish? As we said before, the makif of Sukkot is nimshach gevon lachem and apnimius. That this inyan of Sukkot, which represents the essence of Ayid, came down in apnimius through the lulav. So then after that, the second night of Sukkot, you could have a shafta mayim besosin, you could have the drawing of the water with simcha, and it's a simcha shalamaylam naseichel. That's a simcha higher than seichel. But when does that simcha come? After it penetrated into every detail of the person, which is represented in the daled minim. The avedet mesiras nefesh shalamaylam naseichel nem durch alles and the keches nimim meira simcha mitis v'gila. It's after you do the mitzvah of lulav. Then the Aved of Mesiras Nefesh, which is beyond Seichel, takes over all his Keiches Pnimim, all his specific inner attributes, and that brings, as we said before, a real Simcha and a revealed Simcha. So that's the explanation, the opinion that the Simcha of Beis HaSheva comes after the mitzvah of the Daled Minim. Aber Avol beginning the Alocha, as I be a Merishon, the Sukkah is given Nisach HaMayim, B'Meilis Fartem given Shivas HaMayim. But nevertheless, the Alocha is, as the first day of Sukkot was also the pouring of the water. And B'Meile, the night before, was also the drawing of the water. And since it says in Posuk that you have to draw the water with joy, is moving as so for sure, the night before was also with Simcha. Simcha Muteres, it's a Simcha that was allowed. They didn't use the flute or the other instruments, but there was definitely a Simcha the first night. Why is the halacha like that? Now we explained that the real simcha should come after the daled minim. And here we're saying that the night before, the halacha is the night before it was. But since even before you did this mitzvah of lekachtem to take the lulav, from Eshn Regel, from Laila Rishon, that night, even before you have the mitzvah of lulav, we have the mitzvah of sukkah. And the mitzvah of sukkah represents that idea that we have a connection to that higher level. In a makivdik way. You didn't do the mitzvah daled min. In a makivdik way. But does the sibah from the simcha sionte from the rest of Sukkot? Why taka do we have to have a simcha even the first night of Sukkot? Why? Because it's a sukkah. You already have the sukkah. You don't have the shleimus simcha, but you have the sukkah which represents at higher level. The ribe, therefore, is demol shaykh the rinyan for simcha sheva. So since you already have the sukkah, you already have shaykhs to have the simcha same. It's also simcha for shivas of chinas mayim shamayim masagas seichel. You could have simcha from drawing the water, which represent your level of beyond the seichel. While the rinyan of sukkah is nor bechinas makid, but since by sukkah before you do the mitzvah of lulav, it's only in a rounding way, it's around the superficial way. The father say the demodik simcha nit kan shleibes dike und nit das begin. That's why that simcha the first night is not complete, because the first night it wasn't complete, even according to opinion that they did do the drawing then, but it wasn't complete. It's not the begilui. Know the Aveda from the Tilas Dalad Mini, Lakachtam Lachem, only after the Aveda from taking the 4 kinds. Which you're Makayim the mitzvah of Lakachtam Lachem, you bring it Hamshochas Hamaki B'Pnimi, the Maki of the Sukkah comes into the Pnimis. Then is the Simchas B'Shevit and Ganze Sturm, then the Simchas Shevit comes with the whole excitement, the whole storm, meet the Cholim with the flute, to another Klishir, all the other Klishir. So now we understand both. So we have three things. We have the Simcha of the Sukkah, then we have the Simcha of the drawing of the water in the first level, the first night. And then we have the next thing is the Dalit meaning, which brings it the Pnimius. But then the next night, you will have the complete Simcha. This will also explain why now in Golas is the meaning of Yidden all over is the Ascholos for simply Shesheva in the rest of the Nacht Sukkot. That's so now, as we said before, the beginning of this joy of simply Shesheva is also the first night of Sukkot. And we said before, and the reason is because we don't do it with Kleshir, we don't do it with instrument. Mainly, you could have this first night, just also the Simcha. But now, based on what we said before, is like this. What was the reason why the first night it wasn't the real Simcha? Because the Makiv, the great inyan of the Sukkah, which is the Makiv, is not complete Simcha because it didn't come into a Pnimius yet. That inyan that the Makiv has to come into a Pnimius, into your detailed of all your attributes, that was mainly in the first in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when godliness was revealed, and you were able to feel the godliness inside your attributes. So you serve the Eibishter with your keches pnimim, but you had to have the keches pnimim should be absorbed with that feeling of that higher level. But the main Aveda keches pnimim. So when was the real simcha? When you were able to serve Hashem with your keches pnimim, which had that higher madrege. In the time of goals, in a sustainable arena, we don't see the real miracles, which means Lakus godliness, we don't have the Giloi. So we don't really serve Hashem with Pnimis. We don't really understand. We don't really have the feeling. Is the Aschol of Agdamas Aveda. So when we start off this thing, it doesn't have to start with the Keches Pnimim, because the whole Aveda is not really so much with Keches Pnimim. The main Aveda is, and how do you start off? Keches Makifim. That's the main, and that stays the main Aveda. But Mele, even the first night, you're able to have it. It's missing the Keches Pnimim, but our Aveda basically is not really with the Keches Pnimim, because in the Zman HaGolos, we don't really have that Keches Pnimim. And what does it mean that you start off with Mesiras Nefesh without the Keches Pnimim? So that is like this, Bapashtes. Make a very simple example. Al Yevish Mepnei Amaligim. It says, don't be afraid of those people that make fun of you. Have aska, never be strong like a leopard, and be like a fast like a nesher, like a eagle. And you should run like a tzvi, like a deer, and you should be strong like a lion. That's the first thing, that you have to not care. In other words, the Aveda has to be, I have to be strong. I have to not looking at them because I understand they're not necessary. So we're not serving Hashem mainly with the keches of Seichel Amidas. The Meila Herzach nititzt in as as they feel the ilir b'yisr from their zweite Nacht Sukkos. So now the specialty of the second night Sukkos, which means it comes after that Keiach Mesiras Nefesh penetrated into the Keichas Pnimim through the lulav. Now it's felt so much. Now it's not so important. Not so important to wait till you get the makif coming to Pnimius durch Lakachtam Lachem by the Dalit Minim. So now you don't see the Maila of the second night, Lagaba the Resh Nacht, Lagaba the first night. So therefore, now we could have the first night also, the Simcha complete. But since everything in Torah is eternal forever, the Leib base. So even nowadays, whatever happened then has to reflect somehow too. So we say now we don't work so much. The first night is also. On the other hand, it used to be that way. So we have to have something that reflects the second night more than the first. So we have that too. In them Gedla Simcha Gufa, we see in the Simcha the second night is more. The Simcha for Leil base. The second night we make a bigger Simcha. Bees gressa for the Simcha for Leil Aleph, bigger Simcha and bigger than the night, the first night. Bees in Aif Naskilu with the Rinya for Simcha Sashev Hepsacham Leil base. Sometimes as if we feel that when did the real Simcha of Simcha Sashev start the second night, even though it started the first night. But it's the second night is so much more besimcha that it's as if it's just starting. But behind time a goof come to Israel. Because of that, for this reason itself, it comes out. I say, that nowadays there's something special in the Simchas Beis Hasheva Nowadays, even though the real one was then, but there's something there. Just like it says in Game Mesiris Nefesh itself. As Bisman Golus, the time of Golus, when we don't have this revelation of the inner aspects of a person, is there Keach Mesiris Nefesh mer begilu Bisman Abayis? This Keach Mesiris Nefesh, the Eden have Mesiris Nefesh for the Eibishter, without their Abbas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, and the understanding more than the time of the Beis Hamikdash. There's Simcha Shem Tzad Avedah. So the Simcha that comes as a result of your Mesiras Nefesh and Bittul to Hashem, which is nowadays more than the time of the Beis Hamikdash, was this Simcha. Was this the Simcha for Nisach Hamayim? This is the Simcha from the pouring of the water, as we said before. Nowadays it's even greater. So that's a Nefesh. So besides everything he said before, he says another point. Now that we don't have the Keich Pnimis, so it's not the same. But because of that, we have more feeling of the Mesiras Nefesh than they had in time of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Simcha of Simchas Beis HaSheva, which represents that idea of the Mesiras Nefesh, the Bittul to Hashem, nowadays, to a certain degree, could be more than it was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. We talk so by the Rebbe, this Simchas Beis HaSheva was something special beyond, and this explains a little bit of it.